Well, welcome back to the channel. If you've been watching this series on this Allis Chalmers WD, you know that we have worked ourselves up to reassembly to the rear end section. So that's what we're going to be doing this evening, is putting that rear end back together with some new bearings and some new seals. So if that's something that you're interested in seeing, stick around because it's coming up. Okay, so I've got some new bearings and seals that we're going to be putting on this rear end before it goes in. And you can see up here I've got the rear end itself right here. We're going to be replacing this bearing and that bearing as well. And then over here we've got the bearing caps that's going to be getting new seals. So if we look at this one, it's actually this one. Look up in there real close, you can see how damaged that was, and that's why I had oil all over the inside of the cavity and it was a big mess. So we'll be replacing that seal on both. And then I was looking at the races on here, and really they're in pretty good shape. I don't see any reason to put new races on. I did order races with the bearings, and that was prior to me getting it out of the tractor, so I do have the races here if need be. So I got my new bearings, I got another racing bearing there, and then two new seals right there. So I guess step one would be driving the seal out. We'll go ahead and drive those both out and tap the new ones in, and then we'll slide over to the rear end and we'll get those bearings squared away on them. So just right here on the bench in the vise here, that'll give me a good surface to hit against. All right, so I'm gonna put yep, it did. All right, so there's the old seal. Got that one out. Fairly clean in there. I'll still wipe it down. And go ahead and do the second one, the one over here. Ta-da, here we go. Man, oh man. What a job. One little seal. All right, while I got it here, I'm going to take my wire brush on my drill and clean that out. Let's see. Yep, that one will fit. In fact, I did such a good job, I'm going to slide the other one in here real fast and do it. Okay. All right, let's slide over to the bench and we'll start installing the new seals. All right, so we're going to install the new seal, and just looking at it, it's kind of coned back that direction, and then you can see the seal part right here. If you remember on the one that just took me a few minutes to get out, this section of the seal is separated from that outer lip when I was trying to take it apart. So it makes sense that that's going to be facing down just like the old one. And with that being tapered too, I think that will kind of help when you push that axle in there to not tear it. It's kind of leading it towards the center there. So with that said, we're just going to turn this one face down and we'll install it right there. And we got that one installed. So we'll just slide over here and do our next one. There we go. Okay, so we got the 2 new seals put on. So our next step is going to be working over here on the bearings on the rear end, getting those off. Okay, so I'm back over here to the main bench. I've got a 2 jaw puller set up. There's a little bit more of a lip on either side here than what there is on this edge. And I've got this block in here. The bearing can come up so far before it hits the block. So I'm just gonna try that first. If that works, then I'll change up how I've got that center point secured. So we're just gonna try to put a little pressure on this thing and see what it does. Right now it's up against my block here. All right, so I found a socket that would fit, put a little adapter on there to reduce it so that my jaw puller point would fit in that, and then we're just gonna hopefully pull it right off. All right, so there's our bearing. There's that setup that I had. All right, so we got that one off. While we're sitting here in this position, clean that up, and we'll just go ahead and put the new one on. All right, so here's our new one. And that was part 72163-092. Okay, so we're down to the edge. I still got to go probably 3/16. Just looking inside there, I can probably, I'll go down a little bit farther because I've got that tapered shoulder right there. So we'll do that. Yep. There's our noise that we're looking for. Okay, yeah. That looks, actually I'm gonna tap this. There it is. Okay. So that will be one of our bearings on. The other bearing on the other side here, we're gonna have to do the same setup using the 2 jaw puller. I'm not gonna bore you with that. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that apart over here on the vise, and then we'll come back and we'll be ready to set the rear end in the housing. All right, so there's a little bit of prep work that we need to do prior to setting the rear end in the housing, and that is one, we need to put some sort of sealing component, which in my case I'm going to use Permatex, on the face of the bearing cap, and then we'll slide our shims over that, and then we'll put sealer on top of the shim as well. And then lastly, they recommend in the book to put a sealer on your bolts, and so that I'm going to use this pipe joint compound. That works real good for any kind of air, gas systems, anything that has oil. So I'm going to use that on my cap bolts on both sides. And then one additional thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to take my Lucas assembly lube, and I'm going to put it on this surface right here, as well as the surface inside the housing where it's going to be sliding into. So you know, that surface is right here. I've already cleaned everything up as well, so I'll apply it there. And I got to do this same procedure for both sides. So once I have that ready, then basically we can slide the rear end in the housing. I'm going to use a block of wood to hold that up in place, and then hopefully both of the bearing cap retainers will just kind of slide into the housing and we'll be good to go. So let's get started on that. I'm going to go ahead and prep both sides with the gasket material. Go ahead and get my Lucas on. I'm also going to put, well, I won't need to yet. I was going to say I'm going to put some Lucas on those oil seals, but I don't need to because I'm not putting those axles in right now. When I go to put my axles in, I want to lube up that new seal that we put in. So anyway, with that said, let me get all this prepped up and then we'll kick back on when we're ready to actually install it. Okay, so I've got everything prepped up. I've got the sealer on the bolts. I've got the Permatex on both sides of my shims on both of the caps. And I'm pretty much ready to stick this thing in here. So I'm trying to get a good angle. We'll try this first and then we'll see how it goes. Just gonna grab the rear end. The gear goes to the right. And like you saw before, it just barely fits. So just slide it in there. Be careful of your new bearings. And once I get it back in there, I've got a piece of deck board. I'm just gonna lift this up and slide it in place. Now what that deck board does is centers me up fairly decent in the holes here. Trying to get it squared up. So you can see there I'm pretty centered with my bearing in the hole. So that'll be the cap I want to try to get on first. So I'm going to hold that and get my cap. And I'm just looking right in from my top. I'm pretty close right there as far as being lined up. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get one of my bolts started here. That's just going to hold my cap in place. Actually, I'm probably going to have to get a couple, one top and one bottom. Alright, so you can see there, I just got a couple of bolts in there. Pretty straightforward process here. And let me get situated here and we'll try to look in from the top. Okay, so I couldn't really get a view from the top. This is how I'm situated here on the bench. So we'll just take our other cap and we'll just slide it up here. Alright, so before I pull the block of wood out, I want to go ahead and make sure that both of the caps are at least getting started to be in the housing here. This one over here is just not quite there yet, so I want to try to get that thing situated. Transmission. All right, so I've got those caps in place, and I'll just run around through here and put my remaining bolts in, and then I'll torque them down. I'm not sure what the torque specs are yet. I need to check that out in my book. So I'll do that, and then we'll put the torque wrench on here and finish that up. So at this point, we've got our rear end installed. It's made to back up with our main shaft coming out of the transmission, as it should be. So anyway, that will conclude this video. Hopefully you learned something here if you're getting ready to tackle one of these rear ends, or if you're doing brakes or anything on a Allis WD-45. It'll be the same setup. If you're going to be doing brakes, it's a real good time to go ahead and do your seals while you're in there. So this will be the process for that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put on the rear end cover, the rear cover right here. And first thing, we'll go ahead and put some Permatex. Actually, let me dry fit this thing real quick and just make sure I get coverage where it needs to be. Yep, so I can pretty much follow the housing. So I'm just going to put a thin bead of Permatex down through here. Like so. And I think all of these, yeah, all of the bolts that go in this are in the dry. And I've also went through and ran the tap in there just to make sure that I didn't have any dirt back in there. So now we'll go ahead and just stick the gasket on. Try to get everything lined up here. It's just a smidgen out of line here, so we may have to kind of fight with that just a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to leave, you want to move it down these holes just a little bit because I don't want to have a whole lot sticking out here. And then we'll run back through here with more Permatex. By the way, this gasket is 702-22013. It's stamped right there on the gasket itself. Okay, I've got all my bolts cleaned up as well. So we'll just slide this cover in place. Go ahead and get me a couple of these started. You want to leave these two out for right now because they're going to have the hydraulic remote. And actually the one I'm putting in right now, the center, yeah, I don't know if it's on this tractor, but on the diesel, 45 diesels, there's a little bracket that goes into that, that's on your plate that connects up here. It's got one that turns down. But for where we're at right now, these are all going to go on because I want everything to get sealed up correctly. These are the PTO bolts. We'll go ahead and get them started in here. I'm actually going to swap those around. These may not tighten down all the way because that PTO housing sticks out a pretty good ways. Alright, so I'm just going to go through and kind of snug these up here. Actually, prior to that, I know I said don't put these in, but I'm just going to use these to just make sure my gasket is good and in line. Now I'm going to snug these up. Okay, I've got those cinched up now. I think probably our next step, we got to go ahead and put on that hydraulic piece. It's pretty straightforward. It just buttons up right here, and I've got it cleaned up and ready to go. So anyway, that's how you install the back cover. Not much to it. Alright, that will complete the video of the rear end installation and the rear cover. Thanks for watching. Hit like, subscribe, share, leave comment below, and stick around for more videos on this Allis Chalmers WD restoration project.